Hi, folks. Welcome to the sixth installment of the On the Edge with LF webinar series. On today's webinar, we'll be hearing from the State of the Edge project, exploring the intersection of IoT, AI, 5G, and edge computing. We can move. Today's speakers, Matt Trefiro from Vapor.io and Jacob Smith from Packet. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jacob to further provide introductions and get us underway.
All right. Thanks so much, Brett, and thanks everyone for joining. So as Brett said, today we're going to discuss a little bit of the state of the edge and the intersection of a lot of things. But to get to know us a little bit, my name is Jacob Smith. I currently run marketing and strategy at Packet, which is a company owned by Equinix, the global data center provider. And with me today is a super close friend and colleague, especially on this project, Matt Trefiro. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, good morning, everybody, and good morning, Jacob. So my name is Matt Trefiro, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Vapor.io. We are an edge infrastructure company. We build networks and data centers near the access edge of the networks. And I'm also an amateur lexicographer, which is partly explains my excitement about the Open Glossary of Edge Computing, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
An amateur lexicographer. That's amazing, Matt. Good deal. Okay, well, we're going to get right going here today because we have a lot to cover. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, the edge is in a way about intersection and confluence of a lot of different trends. And so this is a plan and a page for all of you who like that kind of thing, and a quote that I found kind of interesting, which is thinking about how as businesses evolve and as experiences evolve, we're seeing the need for delivering the infrastructure and compute and other resources to support those converging at the edge. And so there's all kinds of data, some of which we'll talk about as we go through the next couple of slides on the State of the Edge report, that together as a community, we're trying to understand, accelerate, evolve, and sort of coalesce around to build a thriving edge ecosystem that can support all of the experiences that you hear about in the news like this, but also in daily life. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to do a little bit of definition and kind of work on placing the State of the Edge project within the LF Edge community. So Matt, if you want to give us a little bit of walkthrough, would you mind driving?
Yeah, it's just I can figure out how to unmute my thing. So, you know, one of the most important things in having intelligent conversations about technology in particular is to make an effort to use the same terms in the same way. And, you know, when Jake and I started this project, the joke was you ask 100 people where the edge is and you get 100 different answers. And there really are 100 different answers because it depends on your perspective. And so what we felt was needed was some definitions of edge and some taxonomical breakdowns for reasons other than marketing purposes. You know, if you can't answer actually where it is, i.e., where's the telco edge, right? If you're trying to express a business model or a vertical industry or type of company, you're probably not describing something that's specific enough. Certainly not in technical aspects. So one of the exercises that we started at the State of the Edge, but then when we became part of the Linux Foundation's LF Edge, it became a top-level effort across all of the LF Edge projects, and that was to harmonize a taxonomy and a language across all the projects. This is a slide that describes that. I'm not going to go into this in great detail. I'll point out a couple of things. The first thing is, you'll notice right in the center of the diagram is this last mile network. And that's on purpose, because if you look at what people really care about today, it's the edge of the last mile network, and it's the two sides of it. And you've got sort of a downstream side on the left, which we call the user edge. And those are the sensors, the intelligent automobiles, the gateways, the robotics, you know, some on-prem data center capabilities, and so on. And then you have a last mile network, and you've got other edge infrastructure on the upstream side. So you've got things like the mobile industry's multi-access edge computing, which integrates compute with the mobile access networks, and you have things like what my company does and things what Jacob's company does that really span, in that area between, the edge of the access network, which is the baseband units, the telco, or the cable head ends, or the equivalent, and the regional data centers and IX points. And, I think the summary here is the internet is coming from the right, and it's going to reach all the way down to the left, and lots of interesting stuff, including a lot of data, is coming up from the left and is going to be, to some degree, processed at left, but also processed on the right. Next slide, Jacob. So those of you that are new to the LF Edge, I just want to show this slide and talk a little bit about, so LF Edge projects have different stages, depending on where they're introduced to the project and how much momentum they have. State of the Edge is a growth stage project, and some of the open source projects that have been around for a while, predating even the formation of the LF Edge, are at a much higher impact stage, like a Crano and EdgeX Foundry. And then the Linux Foundation has members. These are the premier members, but there's all kinds of levels of membership, including some nonprofit memberships that don't cost any money at all. So I encourage you to check that out. Next slide, Jacob. And so if you want to read more about the LF Edge projects or about that taxonomy, it's covered in great detail in this really great white paper that we're very proud of. You can get it on the lfedge.org website. The URL is at the bottom there, but if you just search, you can find it. And it goes through that diagram in great detail and provides a great introduction to edge computing.
Great, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to take back over here and introduce you to the state of the edge. And I guess the first question, is how does a report relate to the technology that we all think about when we think about edge and cloud computing and all the other trends that are intersecting here? And I think Matt brought up an important point earlier on, which is that, it's really about common taxonomy and a way to understand how we can collectively invest, but mainly serve customers, right? How we can create a thriving ecosystem that really goes from, all aspects of the stack and helps customers to innovate, right? And so one thing that we did when we started the State of the Edge project a few years ago as a really collection of like-minded companies who were trying to accelerate adoption at the edge and innovation at the edge was to look at how to make sure that it was neutral and in a way that harkens back to the really beginnings and the evolutions of the internet. You'll hear us speak a little bit about the third act of the internet. Matt can give you the perspective on that, but really the interconnectedness and the community aspects of networks is really important, especially as you move to the edge, right? Especially as you become more complex, as it gets more diverse. And so as part of that, we brought State of the Edge and merged it with the thriving LF Edge ecosystem, which really is becoming a central gathering point for projects and people and companies looking to innovate at the edge. So we're really pleased to have the project accepted and really thriving within this community. One of the great aspects that Matt mentioned is that it is open, right? And so you can join and you can contribute. Even if you're not a full member, you can contribute and participate in many of the working groups that we hold. So make sure to go to lfedge.org to kind of learn how to do that or ask any of us in the Q&A. Okay, so some clear background here. We founded the State of the Edge report back in 2017. Really it came out, as Matt and I like to say, over beers. That's how many good ideas start. And this one was certainly one of them, which was, hey, we should get some people together to really stop debating at the bar about what edge is and try to get a common definition. And that was really the impetus that became the first report back in 2017, released then. And it was a hefty one. You can go to stateoftheedge.com right now and go ahead and access the previous reports that we published. But you'll see it was really wrestling with the idea of a common language and identifying how we can work together and understand each other, which with the projects that we have now and with the LF Edge is really seeming like a little bit less of an issue, but you get to those moments where you're interacting with someone from a particular perspective or technology, and you realize how valuable it is to really have a clear understanding, especially in an evolving ecosystem like this. So the state of the edge is vendor neutral, super important. We try to keep it focused on moving the industry forward, not in promoting a particular aspect of it. And so that's really led us to, rely upon independent research. And so the report, while guided by, the working group at the State of the Edge project, is written in part by independent analysts and authors. So if you read previous reports, you can find a pretty interesting, diverse group of thinkers who are working actively in the edge. Okay, right. Some of the companies that have contributed to this, it really continues to evolve, and I think it's on a growth stage right now, in line with its categorization in the LF-Edge project. Include data center providers like where Matt and I work, but also software innovators, a silicon, and really the whole gamut. And so I think that the important point here is that diversity of participation at the edge, which is represented here on this simple logo slide, is really critical. And I think that's something we've learned through each version of the report over the last few years, is that the edge is inherently diverse and is complicated, and solving for the problems that are evolving requires a wide community. And so in addition to helping to align and define the conversation around the edge, it's really to expand the tent, right? To make sure that the variety of technology providers, but also customers who can actually help innovate, really can come together and meet. Okay. So a couple practical points here. State of the Edge, merged in with LF-Edge. That's been about a year now. So we're going on to our first report under the LF-Edge project right now. And that includes a couple of key components that Matt will speak a little bit more to later, but you'll need to check out the Open Glossary of Edge Computing and also the Edge Landscape project. These are key ways to help us understand the ecosystem and to collaborate in strengthening how we think about it. There's also the Edge taxonomy, which I think Matt will absolutely look to take the lead on here. Okay, great. So the last thing here, if you're looking to be involved, all reports really are produced collaboratively, and they're funded collaboratively. So the past few years, those were funded independent of the LF-Edge project, but now that they're part of that, it's through the membership organization, and that really does speak to the idea of neutrality. And so, that's allowed us to produce, I think, some pretty excellent industry standard reporting, but also to do so in a way that is not, biased towards a particular vendor or frankly, element of the edge that, might be produced, in line with the vendor. Okay. Excellent. All right. So the last one I want to go through, I think it's the last one in this section, is the landscape. And that's, really a community contributed project as well. You can access it via landscape.lfedge.org. This is generated actually off of GitHub. So if you are part of a company that you think should be represented, or you have, better yet, feedback on, what's missing or where, something should be categorized, we have a working group that leads this. And you can submit pull requests to add your contributions. So this is very much in line with the community-driven nature of the report, but frankly, a little bit easier to get involved with, because you can really get a visual sense of the landscape and look for the gaps as things evolve, or adjustments to help make it really clear for all of us who are participating in the ecosystem. Okay, little preview of what's happening next, as we are in the 2020 year, but we are working on 2021 already. It feels like this year has gone by pretty fast, and that we're really excited to release our next version of the State of the Edge report, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's going to ship later this year in December, in line with what we did last year, and hopefully be very fresh and relevant as we enter an exciting year for Edge. I mean, we thought last year was exciting. This year is super exciting, and be really a touchstone for I'd say, the industry in addition to the ecosystem, which is, coalescing around edge computing right now. In addition, we'll have updates to the Open Glossary and the landscape that I mentioned on the previous slide. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic back to Matt so he can give you some highlights from last year's report, which I think has really come to fruition this year. So Matt, do you want to give us a couple slides here on the 2020 report?
Yeah, actually, go to the next slide, and I want to come back to the slide. Yeah, so one of the most valuable contributions, I believe, that last year's Stage Edge report made was characterizing what's happening at a macro level by casting it through the lens of the entire history of the internet, right? And so the metaphor we used was a 3-act play. And, as a metaphor, there are some imperfections, but I think it really helps with the understanding. So, the first act of the internet was when the internet first became available. And, even the first few years of the browser, or the, mid to late 90s, where the magic of the internet, wasn't like AR or VR or even video. The magic of the internet is I could be any place on the planet and request something from some other computer that could be anywhere else on the internet. And while it may take seconds, and in case of a video, maybe, to tens of minutes to get that request, I would get it. And so it was pure magic. And then, something happened as we got into the mainstream browser age with, Netscape and Microsoft and so on. And that was like normal people, you and me and our parents and our cousins and everybody started consuming content on the internet. And we wanted it to be rich like pages of paper. And we wanted it to be like real-time videos and all of that. And that put a tremendous amount of strain on the internet. The internet was built basically to ship text around. HTML at first was used. Remember those old sites, GeoCities? It was basically text with a couple of little low-res icons and blinky stuff. And a lot of that was because we just didn't have the bandwidth or the connectivity to produce larger things. I mean, we all remember waiting for a JPEG to load, right? Like that just seems like crazy these days. But the reason for that was most of the storage and compute were located far away from the people requesting it. And there was a group of scientists out of MIT that invented what we now call the CDN. They went on to found Akamai, which is, a behemoth in the CDN industry. And the CDN, Akamai and their competitors, radically changed the internet by doing something very simple, by doing what I can find in the literature, the first reference to edge computing, actually. And that is they took storage servers and they placed them all over the planet in locations that were closer to the users. And they preloaded those with content that people were most likely going to request. But traditional cache model, to think of that. And that fixed the internet for a long time. I mean, that made it possible for us to watch, high resolution, real-time videos and load web pages quickly and all of that. And so we call that the second act of the internet, is when the CDN really unlocked that next wave of capability and rich content and made it possible for us to have what we consider the internet experience today. But now we're entering the third act of the internet. And there's a lot of characteristics of the third act, but the one that I think offers the most explanatory value is we're moving from a world primarily where the traffic on the internet is primarily humans talking to machines, right? It's me, I'm typing, I can type, 130 words a minute, whatnot. To a world where it's machines talking to machines. So humans operate in ones of seconds. Machines operate in milliseconds, nanoseconds, microseconds. Humans can generate, 120 words per minute. Machines can generate 8K video and terabytes of data coming out of a sensor network. And the value of that data decays over time. And so you want to analyze as quickly as you can. It's also very expensive to ship around. And so there's this new thing emerging, which is edge computing. And that is put what we think of in the cloud today, which might be far off, next to the sensors or on the sensors or in the network close to the sensors, so that all that processing can happen with less data being transmitted and with less time. Okay, Jacob, next slide. Or previous slide, actually. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So in the 2020 report, which we published in December 2019, we decided to do something interesting, and that was to build a forecast model. Because there are a bunch of forecast models for Edge out there, and I don't think any of them were very good. They certainly were all different, and none of them were open source, so they were all expensive. So we hired an ex-Yankee Group analyst, Phil Marshall, to build a forecast model on a fairly narrow portion of edge computing, and that is what is the server and IT infrastructure required to deliver on all these use cases. So, how many, all the servers, all the disk drives, all the data centers to house those, how much is going to be spent on just that? We built a model, and it's covered in great detail in the report. I'll cover some highlights, but, basically we predict a $700 billion cumulative CapEx spend over the next decade. And that is driven by 102,000 milliwatts of compute, which is how us in the server world tend to measure compute by 2028. Go on, Jacob. 2 slides forward, I guess. So people ask, well, why are we doing this? And I think this chart just tries to lay some of those things out. This is primarily a latency chart. There's a lot of reasons for putting things at the edge, speed only being one of them. Transit cost and things like that also matter. But I think people tend to understand speed. So, some of the activities we do today, web browsing or doing stuff are oh, the slide changed on me, are become available. So people always ask, okay, well, where are we on the spectrum in terms of deployment? And in 2020, a lot of things we're deploying because sort of the understructure for edge computing. And so those are these, the next revolution of CDNs, the no longer just caching, but also doing a lot of compute. The cloud providers are pushing things out to the edge. All the cloud providers are offering edge zones. Some of them are doing partnerships with the telcos. We've got a huge growth in streaming games, whether it's Fortnite or Stadia. And frankly, the entirety of the telco upgrade to 5G infrastructure is going to require a tremendous amount of edge compute, primarily because all of those appliances that used to be black boxes that you would install at the cell tower are now being virtualized into cloud compute workloads, and they need to run on servers that are run on data centers and edge locations. Okay, next slide. And just to tease a little bit, this is a worldwide phenomenon. And North America is actually not ahead. I mean, China is unbelievable. They are deploying something like 15,000 cell towers and small cells a year in China. And just to give you an idea, the entirety of the U.S. maybe has 100 cell towers in total. And of course, China already has an installed base of cell towers, so these are net new. And doing a lot of edge compute. So anyways, I think it's interesting. There's a lot more data in the State of the Edge report and a lot of narrative that explains it. So I definitely encourage you to go check it out.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And sorry for my bad driving. Maybe we can get an autonomous driver.
I thought you were trying to get me to talk faster.
Hurry up. All right. Let's get to 2021. So that, the overall hook for this webinar is about the intersection of things that Matt was just mentioning are moving to the right here, right? At to require low latency or enable it, right? So things like 5G or consumers like, autonomy. Sometimes it's a little hard to understand what fits where. And so what we're looking at in the 2021 report is this, intersection of these trends, right? Of course, these technologies, but also really the business case, right? So my favorite thing on the internet right now is who led digital transformation at your company. And it's, it's been kind of shocking, for those of us in the infrastructure or internet, I'd call it the digital space this year, about how, radically different a trajectory has become because of the pandemic, right? And so it's put strain on the internet, and it's put investment into some of the things that even in last year's report or the year before, we were saying like, these are ready or coming soon, right? Is really put a focus on digital experiences. And those experiences are by and large, happening at the edge. And whether they're with people or with, as Matt said, the sort of billions of sensors and devices that are starting to inform our experiences, those are the use cases and the technologies that are front and center for us right now. So I'll be looking at that. We have a working group, which, we kicked off a few months ago, and we will publish the next report in December 2020. And pretty much, the obvious points are here, but let me kind of bring you through a little bit about what we're thinking about. As a way into this time in the edge, what we decided to work on was focus on involving independent research around the state of the key components that we see, which critical infrastructure, things like data centers and connectivity. There are some oddballs there. There's more satellites delivering internet today than there were last year. That's for sure. The state of hardware, obviously software, where physical and digital kind of come together, and the networks that really bind them all together. And so I put in some pictures here of things that came across my news feed just in the last week. Circle K, national chain investing in, autonomous retail with standard cognition. NVIDIA obviously making a pretty big purchase this past week with ARM, and really moving a lot of their focus of their growth around AI to the edge, right? Low powered, inference devices, all kinds of things. The state of infrastructure, it was amazing to see, Microsoft pull out of the water off of Scotland, its data center that it had put in the water 2 years ago. And really the opposite of the cloud, I guess, is underwater, right? So fascinating to see where infrastructure is evolving. And then this really not great screenshot, but of things that are working today to use edge computing, like drones for analyzing industrial equipment. But it was a little comical to think about self-run stores and drone delivery a year ago, maybe 2 years ago for sure. But now it seems like a really pretty good idea. And so we're seeing use cases that felt a little far off becoming quite real, and that's in line with the research that Matt showed previously, which we're going to be updating. Okay, one other part that was really popular in last year's report that we introduced was a series called Postcards from the Edge. And this, again, was a way to cast the net a little further, even than our research, and invite people who were building or using or innovating at the edge to share what's on their mind, right? To share what they're learning, what they're doing, what they're seeing. And so what we did was we did postcards, excerpts within the report that then played off of full, articles or blog posts on the stateoftheedge.com. And I thought that these were really interesting. We got a lot of different perspectives, as you can see here, things like what Monica wrote about who will build and pay for it, right? These are great questions. It's not a simple answer, and some of these things are really evolving. So we're looking forward to another series of that, and contributions are welcome. Again, this is about the community, so diverse authors and viewpoints are encouraged. And if you are looking to participate or have someone in your networks, we'd appreciate having them reach out and contact us about it being included. The only rule is that it's not an advertisement. We're not looking to, for ourselves and our own companies. We all have a stake in how this industry goes, but really when we're soliciting perspectives, we're looking for something that can add real value to people who pick up the report, or as you might say, download it. Yeah, great. Okay, so Matt, I'm going to just see if you can help, give the lay of the land here, because there's a couple more links than I can read off. All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, bring it home. Not much to say on this slide. In fact, I'm not going to talk directly to the slide. I think it's self-explanatory. What I will do is pick up on a couple of things. So as Jacob mentioned, there are 3 working groups underneath the State of the Edge. You can find them all at stateoftheedge.com, as well as the 3 reports and the blog, which has the entirety of all the postcards from last year that Jacob mentioned. Great resource there. And you can find all of the projects and the GitHub repos and stuff from stateoftheedge.com. There's also a way to contact us there if you'd like to get a hold of us. In addition to the reports, there's the Open Glossary of Edge Computing. We didn't talk about that much, but it's just a dictionary of words, and it sits in a GitHub repo. And so you are welcome to provide feedback by doing a pull request or creating an issue, and we'll definitely look at it. We're just about finished harmonizing it with that taxonomy slide that I showed you that's in that white paper. So that's terrific work, and we always need help there. And then, as we did spend some time on, we do have the Edge Interactive Landscape, small team maintaining that. What we mostly need is for participating organizations and companies that have a stake in the Edge to help us understand where they should go and to provide us an SVG logo, which are impossible to find on the internet. We can't take a PNG, we can't Google image search and screenshot it. It doesn't work. It's got to be, because that landscape, it might not be obvious from the screenshot, is entirely generated from a database, and it can be recreated on the fly with different filters and different slices and different perspectives, and at different scales. So we do need the SVG logos to be able to provide that functionality. It's really a terrific tool. And then, of course, there's all the typical open source ways to interact, mail list, Slack channels, and wikis. So please do take the time to check out State of the Edge and become a participant if you have the appetite.
Great. Absolutely. Okay, well, I just have one question for you, Matt, to end up the webinar here, which is I showed my cards, and the weirdest thing that I saw come out of the internet on the Edge last week was the data center coming out of the water. Are you guys putting any data centers in the water, Matt? Or
not currently? No, we think water is a bad idea for data centers.
Great.
But yeah, that was pretty cool watching them, power wash years of barnacles off that thing.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, I'm most looking forward to in this year for the Edge, because I live in rural Vermont. I really hope that those satellites start to get my latency down and deliver the internet to all the places that it's not now. I'm just floored by the infrastructure that we think about for cloud, like you said, the different acts of the internet. And now we're seeing things like Project Loon as a commercial independent entity, and Starlink, really becoming interesting and viable options as part of our internet. So, well, it's easy to kind of look at a slide and say, hey, the internet's changing. It's changing because people are physically changing it, like at Vapor, and obviously or Equinix or Loon, or
yeah, it's really interesting. It's one of the most fundamentally different things about edge computing compared to even all the other projects in LF Edge or Linux Foundation in its entirety, is that the edge has moving parts. It's not software. I mean, it is a lot of software, but it's not just software. I mean, there are there are fans keeping servers cool, and so it's a really interesting. Yeah, really interesting hybrid
those things in the underwater data center.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, are there any questions? I mean, I think we've got time left. We won't go the full hour, obviously, but we're happy to field questions about anything, about the state of the edge, or just like what we're seeing in the industry, because Jacob and I tend to see a lot of it. Or nothing. You can all go back to.
Yeah, folks.
Well, I think Joe wins the award for best data center pun there with water data centers are a whole new wave. That's a good one. I like that.
We're drowning in laughter.
we do have the so we do have the Q&A as well as the chat available for questions. There was one question that I did receive around the postcards at the Edge. You noted submissions were welcome. Is there a portal, a mail list, a preference of where to volunteer or submit those to?
info@stateoftheedge.com is probably the fastest that comes to both Jacob and me.
Okay.
And I would start with an idea, not a finished essay, because then we can help guide so there's enough diversity in topics that are covered uniquely. But yeah, we're absolutely would love to hear from everybody who has an appetite of contributing.
Great. And we have a question here. What's the biggest development since starting the State of the Edge, the LF State of the Edge? So Matt, you want to go first, and I'll give mine too. What's the biggest development in the last?
Well, I'm gonna cheat a little. I'm gonna answer what I think is the most interesting recent big development, and you sort of preluded to it, the COVID-19. But let me explain why. It's not to make Zoom faster or better, although for local school districts it certainly could help with that. What I've seen is any company that builds something or grows something or logistics something, moves it around, has an automation strategy. They have an AI and robotic strategy, but they probably had a 5 to 10 year roadmap for it. All of those have been accelerated. There's clear direction from the board of directors of a lot of companies that have said, you need to move this to the front of the line. And so we're seeing a lot of real customers showing up with their checkbooks open, looking to accelerate the solution to their problems that edge computing can be applied to. So that is, in my mind, gigantic.
Yeah, I'll second that and give it a trend I think is interesting. Certainly the idea of reach, whether it's regional or global, like you got to get to everyone, right? The one thing I would put my finger on as a trend to answer the question, what's the biggest development since starting a couple of years ago? And I came a little bit more from the software world and the developer world. And I think one of the most fascinating things is is how developers are starting to touch wireless. I think that's, with 5G, not only do we have a new technology, but we're seeing a whole new class of innovators, whether it's because, Microsoft acquiring or, Facebook developing, people are working on that last part of the edge, which is the one that gets right into your hand. Wireless is a big deal, and developers are starting to really touch it. And I'm super fascinated to see what happens with that.
Yeah, that's really true, Jacob. I mean, most people don't realize it, but the wireless data was, not Wi-Fi, but cellular wireless data was bolted onto the internet, and in a not great way either. And what's happening is it's becoming fully integrated, down to the point where compute is making its way into the telco network, which is just fascinating, and it's going to be life-changing.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. Brett, any other questions from the audience here today?
I am not seeing any other questions. For those that may have missed it earlier, this session was recorded, so those looking to revisit, it will be posted to the lfedge.org website under news and events, as well as the LFEdge YouTube channel. So quick housekeeping note on that front, but I think no further questions. Any final words from Jacob and or Matt?
We'll see you in December with the next version of the State of the Edge report. If you read all the way to the end, you get a prize. All right. So we'll look forward to your comments. And
we're going to build an Easter egg in there.
That's right. Absolutely.
Next year. Yeah. It's gonna be...
So, thanks everyone for attending.
Yes. See you guys.
Questions. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.